I am Margaret, a psychiatrist. One day, while talking to a patient, he suddenly pulled out a gun, intending to commit suicide. I remained calm and tried to convince him to put the gun down. I told him that no matter what happened, I could find a way to help him. After some patient questioning, I learned that he owed $25,000 in gambling debts, and if he didn't pay it off by tomorrow, his life would be in danger. He mocked me, saying that I was just boasting and couldn't possibly help him. He wanted to see what I could actually do. At that moment, my inner sympathy caused me great pain, but I decided not to give up on him. That night, based on the information he gave me, I went to the casino and found his creditor, Mike. I analyzed the gambler's name and didn't find it particularly memorable. But when I opened the ledger, I discovered that the actual debt was only $800. Mike was curious and asked how I knew this, and I proudly replied that it was because of my professional skills. Suddenly, Mike proposed that if I could help him with a small task, the gambler's debt would be forgiven. He then demonstrated his ability. He could accurately guess which hand held a coin. He explained that when I made a decision, my nose would subtly point toward the hand holding the coin. He called this body language a tell, and he used it to win in gambling. That night, a big bearded gambler had been winning consistently, and Mike noticed that he too had a tell. Whenever the big man was bluffing, he would subconsciously touch his ring. Mike wanted me to pretend to be his girlfriend, and when he got a good hand, we would make an excuse to go to the restroom while I would observe whether the big man touched his ring. It was a simple task that could help get the gambler out of his predicament. Of course, I agreed. At the table, fortune swung back and forth. Soon, Mike had a great hand, and the stakes kept getting higher. The other gamblers were too scared to match his bet and folded, but the big man raised the bet to $6,000. Mike stood up, angrily shouting that the big man was bluffing, and then made an excuse to go to the restroom. After Mike left, I noticed that the big man began touching his ring. When Mike returned, I casually passed this information to him, and Mike, confident, prepared to face off against the big man. However, Mike didn't have enough chips to continue. He planned to bet on his reputation, but the big man insisted that Mike put up the money first. At that point, I was certain that the big man had a weak hand, so I offered to front the $6,000. However, to my surprise, the big man actually had a stronger hand. Mike was furious and had a heated argument with him. The big man, clearly not someone to mess with, quickly pulled a gun from his body. In desperation, I ended up writing a $6,000 check on the spot, but as I looked up, I noticed that the barrel of the gun on the table was leaking water. In an instant, I realized it was all a scam. I took back the check and exposed the truth. To my surprise, the fraudsters didn't react at all when their identities were revealed, and they even gave me a chip as a souvenir. In the end, the group went together for a late-night meal. The next day, I decided to visit Mike at the casino. The con artist's tricks piqued my interest, and I intended to write a paper on their methods. I wanted to learn from Mike, understand the way con artists think, and how they operate. Mike seemed somewhat intrigued by me and agreed to my request without hesitation. To help me better understand the art of the con, Mike showed me another trick. He gently touched my 5 fingers and asked me to think of one. He then accurately guessed which finger I had in mind. Mike seemed to know me well. He knew that I was a workaholic, lonely inside, needing companionship and possession. Without hesitation, Mike got straight to the point and launched an aggressive pursuit. My heart was completely captured by him. Soon, we arrived at the hotel to continue with our plan, but all the rooms were booked for a fashion show event. At that moment, a well-dressed black man placed his room key on the front desk, seemingly heading off to the fashion show and not expected to return soon. Mike quickly came up with a plan to trick the staff into handing him the key. We took the key and found the room. I opened the door and the gateway to our operation was opened. Afterward, my heart was entirely occupied by Mike. As we left, I secretly took a small knife as a memento. Once outside the hotel, Mike checked his watch and suddenly remembered there was a big scam operation to pull off with some accomplices. He told me to go home first, but I insisted on joining them to gather more material and get closer to Mike. Reluctantly, Mike agreed and had me pretend to be his wife. I stood on the street, next to Mike and a businessman he had just met, waiting for the traffic light. Suddenly, a con artist walked out of the hotel, pretending to accidentally drop a suitcase while hailing a cab. Mike, seeing this, walked up to the suitcase, intending to return it to the hotel, but accidentally pressed the switch. The group gathered together and discussed for 3 hours, concluding that the $80,000 in cash was definitely stolen. After all, who would carry that much money at night? Mike claimed to work at a bank and analyzed that the money might be dirty or even counterfeit, so no one should touch any of it. He offered to pay $20,000 to take the money, intending to split it once they confirmed the situation. The businessman, unwilling to accept, offered $30,000 to take it to his own bank for verification. Thus, the group started haggling again, arguing throughout the night until the businessman was finally conned. The businessman went to the restroom to freshen up and told everyone that once the bank opened, he would immediately withdraw the money. Mike told me that the businessman would use the money to keep them at bay and then make off with the suitcase. But before that, Mike planned to secretly switch the suitcase, easily getting away with $30,000. The $80,000 in cash had actually been borrowed from the mob, and it had to be returned tonight. As I was preparing to leave the hotel, I noticed the businessman had a gun tucked into his waistband. I overheard him telling others that he was a police officer and had informed other officers outside the hotel. Once we left, they were ready to arrest us. I quickly told Mike, and we had to leave immediately. But as we reached the door, the police stopped us, identified themselves, and demanded that we cooperate. I couldn't let my reputation be ruined here. Mike got into a fight with the police, blocking the door. I tried with all my strength to open it, but the police pushed me back and held the door closed. In the struggle, the police didn't manage to put the gun back in time, and it went off accidentally, killing one officer on the spot. At this point, we had no choice but to run. We didn't dare take the elevator and ran all the way to the garage, preparing to escape from there. Just then, Mike noticed a car across the street that could help us get away, but I had to steal it. My hesitation caused one of the con artists to beat me. But Mike insisted I had to steal the car. It was our only way out. Reluctantly, I mustered the courage to steal the car, and we sped off to the outskirts. The con artist cleaned the fingerprints off the car while scolding Mike for breaking the rules and getting me involved. After a heated argument, Mike told me to go home and forget everything. The money would be returned to the mob and we would go abroad to lay low. However, to my surprise, the con artist had lost the suitcase with the money in the confusion. If we didn't return the money tonight, we would all die. Realizing the situation was dire, I quickly told Mike that I had enough money in my account to cover it. I withdrew $80,000 in cash and told the con artist that it could be used to pay back the mob. Mike took me to the airport, and on the way, he urged me to lead a normal life, but never turn myself in. After all, the killing was an accident, and I shouldn't let it ruin the rest of my life. This advice weighed heavily on me. Conscience made me want to turn myself in, but doing so would implicate Mike and the others. I sought help from my mentor, who told me that since I had already committed an unforgivable act, I had to learn to forgive myself. I returned to my office, canceled all my appointments, and destroyed the con material I had been compiling. Just as I was about to throw away the materials, the initial gambler knocked on my door and said he was heading out and just stopped by to say hello. After sending him off, I went outside to discard the destroyed materials, but I saw the gambler staring at the red car I had stolen. In an instant, I realized I had been conned. That evening, I found the car near a bar by the casino. The gambler was talking to Mike's accomplice, and the well-dressed black man from the hotel was also there. I approached and saw Mike's con team all sitting together, laughing about their tricks. Each of them had a copy of my best-selling book, indicating that they had thoroughly investigated me. Mike even knew I had stolen his knife before leaving. I was furious, but I didn't expose them. Instead, I decided to get back at them using their own methods and make Mike experience the pain and shame of being conned. After Mike and his accomplices split the money, they were preparing to move on to another scam. I waited at the airport and pretended to run into Mike by chance. Mike seemed a little nervous, explaining that he had missed yesterday's flight and had to leave today. I pretended to be calm and said that the police were following me. For safety, I had withdrawn $250,000 in savings. Hearing I had that much money, Mike quickly changed his attitude, pretending to check for anyone following us. We both took cash from the safe. But since I was new to this, I made a slip of the tongue by mentioning the knife Mike had given me. Mike immediately seized on the mistake, knowing my weakness. He knew I wouldn't report him because I cared too much about my reputation. Enraged, I pulled out a gun and demanded an apology from Mike. I didn't care about the money, but I was furious about the emotional betrayal. But Mike wasn't concerned, thinking I wouldn't dare to shoot. No sooner had he said that than he was shot in the leg, but he still didn't soften, mocking me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and shot him dead. This time, I wasn't panicked at all. With red eyes, I calmly put away the gun and left this place of chaos behind. Many years later, after returning from a trip, I was full of life. I published a new book and learned to enjoy life. Even my mentor was surprised by the change in me. I told him that I had forgiven myself for the great mistakes I had made, and everything had gotten better. Also, I used Mike's methods to steal Ms. Lin's lighter to satisfy my desires. Now, I have completely freed myself from my past confusion and despair. I have become a villain, living more comfortably and contentedly than ever before. Greed is humanity's eternal curse, and all desires eventually turn into traps.